Hi everyone, my name is Sam. I'm a hairstylist from London and I'm currently based in Los Angeles. I am so excited to introduce to you my very first online course. The reason that I wanted to do this course was because I've been to so many hair extension classes over the years, as well as being a brand educator, and I thought it was finally time for me to start bringing out my own education. I've learned so many bits and pieces, tips and tricks over the years, and I wanted to merge that all together and create something that I truly use behind the chair every single day. What I do is quick, it's easy, and my clients love it. My way of working has evolved so much over the years because the hair extension world is ever growing and ever changing. The way that I do a weft install has changed so much because there's new technologies, and as those new technologies come out, I really want to find the best way to utilize them and to install them on your client's head. This right here is the first of many courses to come, and I just wanted to give you a taster of what's in store. Welcome to your Genius Weft Taster course. In this taster course, we're going to be covering a few different things. I wanted to go over sectioning, beaded foundation, how to layer and stack those wefts, anchor stitches, finishing stitches, and all the stitches in between. I also wanted to add a bonus unit for you, all about pricing and how to price for your weft installs. This is just a one row because I really wanted to give you an insight into how I would do a Genius Weft install, and I feel like this would be the perfect starting point. This is my trolley, and I'm going to be breaking down everything that I use for my Genius Weft installs. First things first, we're going to start with our looper tool. I'm not super picky about looper tools. I love ones from Bellamy, Hair Made Easy. This is actually from the Weave Queen. As long as it's long enough here to hold a lot of beads, that's all I care for. The Hair Made Easy is definitely the longest one that I found, or you can go ahead and make it yourself with some fishing wire. Next up, we have our comb. I love the YS Part combs. I always use them. I do find that this is longer as well, the actual tail of the comb, and they're really strong and sturdy. Next up is beads. These are my favorite, all-time favorite. They're the Lush Hair Pro silicone lined beads, and they're the smaller size, so they are 2mm times 4mm. The reason I love these is because the color variations are fantastic, and I love the fact that the silicone that it lines the bead is colored to the same shade as the bead as well. That is a must. It makes it so seamless when it's in the hair. Moving on to thread, I always use nylon thread for my installs. It's a lot stronger and sturdier than cotton thread. It doesn't go fluffy and it doesn't absorb water either. Again, I'm not super picky. I like the Bellamy thread. I also really like the Lush Pro thread. Hair Made Easy have a thread too. I do feel like I'm gravitating more towards the Lush Pro just because then I can match up the thread with the colored bead that I use. Next up is needles. Needles is really important because it's all about finding a needle size that works for you. Some people prefer a smaller needle, others prefer a bigger. It's also to do with your hand size, what feels comfortable for you. With a smaller needle, you definitely will have more control, and a bigger needle less. But again, some people don't like too small of a needle because they feel like it's getting lost. For example, this is a smaller one. This is actually just from Amazon. And then now I have this one, again from Amazon, but it's a little bit bigger. I also like the gold needles that you can see here. Again, they're from Hair Made Easy. Next up, pliers. I love pliers. I have so many of them, but I feel like the one that I gravitate towards the most is this one. So this one is from Hair Made Easy. This one is a micro and a nano plier. So you can see it has 3 different holes in it. This makes it great for removals and maintenance, but it's also great for the install because it's so small at the tip, so it's super comfortable to get up close to the scalp, and then they're really comfortable for me to hold as well. I also really like the fact that they're smooth. This is really important when working with beads. If your pliers have grooves in them, you're more likely to chip the bead prematurely, so just bear that in mind, especially for those maintenance appointments. Cutters, so these you can use for your keratins, for your weft, anytime you need to cut something. These are just from Amazon. I get a big pack of them and they're a few dollars each, and they're great. They all do the same job. All I need them for is just to trim off the weft when I am cutting it to size. Of course, I can't forget about hairspray. I love using hairspray to keep those flyaways at bay. I often go for something like this, which is a light hold hairspray. I don't need anything strong holding. It just has to be light enough to get those flyaways out of my way. And of course, all things sectioning and pinning and gripping. So these are just Velcros. These are from Covey. I find the size really good. I love the fact that they're curved underneath as well. And then of course my clips. These gold clips are my ride or die. They're from Lush Pro Extensions. And then these are from Framar. These are the big bite clips, really good for sectioning. And then these are also amazing for keeping hairs out of the way. They're the Framar tight tension clips. I also have these as well, which again, I just use them to keep flyaways at bay. These are good because they don't crease the hair. Now that we've broke down all the tools that I'm going to be using, we are ready to go into our install. I'm going to start off by sectioning, and I'm going to show you the most efficient way to section for a 1-row install. Okay, let's get into sectioning for our 1-row install. So to start, I always will just find out, of course, where the middle of the nape is, and I'm just going to do one straight section going all the way down. I like to divide my sections up into chunks. That way I'm not dealing with too much hair and nothing is getting in my way. So now that I've split that in half, I can figure out how low or how high I want that weft to sit. So this is a volume enhancement. So I'm going to bring it to around here, which is 2 inches above from the nape. You can bring it a little bit higher if you want, but I think around here is going to be good for what I want to achieve. Now I'm just going to curve that section and then continue that all the way round. On a real person, this is probably going to be your 2nd row. You would have a nape row here, typically, a 2nd row here, and then a 3rd row on top. So this is kind of like your 2nd row that you could do within a full head, but then also works great just as a volume install on its own. Once I'm happy with that, I just clip everything out of the way. I'm not bothered that it's not perfect right now, because all I'm doing is just carving out that section to start, and then I can work on finessing everything. Okay, so now I can work on doing a mirror image of what I've created here on this side. I'm just going to start here, meet this in the middle. Again, I'm not too bothered if it's like super clean at this moment, because I know that I can finesse it once I've carved out the section. My main priority now is just purely carving out that section and making sure that everything looks cohesive and even. Okay, I'm happy with that. And now I'm just gonna, again, just clip that out the way. Once I go in and clean everything up, that's when I will make this a little bit tighter and more secure. So now what I want to clean up is this part here. So all I'm going to do is just figure out where I want it to drop down and then just section that. And then you can see immediately it just looks a lot cleaner. And then I'll just pin that out the way. And then I'm going to twist her around, making sure everything's nice and clean and cohesive. Now I'm just going to section this to meet with this line here. So now I can just work on cleaning up this line here, which honestly looks really good. Maybe just pinning any little crosshairs for now. And then I wanted to show you where this is sitting. So you could see from where the hairline starts, it's sitting 1 inch above there. So then that way, when the client wears the hair up, you're not going to see anything. So once I'm happy with that, I'm going to move on to the other side. Once I'm happy with how everything's looking, to make sure everything's even, one thing that I do is I'll take my hands and I'll hold it where the ears are and just measure like this and make sure that everything's sitting the same. So I can see here it's really, really nice and even. You never want one side to be higher or lower, because then as it grows out, it's going to feel a little bit wonky and off. So as even as possible is always key. One thing that I've learned, and I actually learned this in a class that I took, was not to sweat the small things. If something's not going to affect your install, don't worry about it. So I'm trying more to embrace that mentality and not waste time on things that truly don't really matter. However, I know how it is to be really OCD and picky. So if you are someone where you like everything really clean and out the way and you don't want any loose hairs hanging out, after you've done all of this portion, you can go in and just take everything up in a pony and get it out the way. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. Honestly, I wouldn't mind working like this, but if you feel like you want it absolutely perfect, I'm going to show you. Okay, so if you want this all really secure, scooped up, out of the way, let me show you. All I'm going to do is just remove all of these little clips, and then this, and then this, and then this one here, and then I'll go in and just really make sure that I'm scooping that all up high and tight. And then at this point, you can get a scrunchie or do it with clips. You're just going to twist this, and then with my Framar tight tension, I'm just going to do one here and then one underneath like that. Top tip, you don't want it extremely tight and pulling, because you always have to remember the scalp and where it's sitting. If this is really, really tight and then you bead like that and let everything down, you might create some elevation. So just be mindful of that when you are sectioning. So this is the point now where I'm going to utilize that hairspray. This is just touchable, very light hold, because all I need it for is these little guys here. So top tip, you want to spray first and then you go in with your comb and then just section out those little guys. And then now you can go in here with your clip or with your Velcro. I'm going to leave it like that, and then I will utilize that Velcro. Just spray a little bit more there, and then again just making sure it's all out of the way. We don't need no crosshairs in this installation. And then now this is where I would utilize this Velcro. This is from Covey. I love the fact that it's curved here, and let me show you how I put that in. So to start, I will put it in at an angle like that, and then I'm going to slide it up like this. That way I've got rid of all those little crosshairs. All right, once we're happy, that's where we can go and start our beaded foundation. So I have the shades in the Lush Pro Extension Beads Dark Brown and Espresso. I can't decide which color I want to do. Usually in this type of situation, I would always go with the darker one, but let me show you a really good way that you can determine what color bead to use. So I've got two beads on here. We have the Espresso and then the dark brown, and I'm going to hold it up against my mannequin and then just bring that down. I feel like the dark brown is actually a really good match on her. However, in a real life situation, if I was ever second guessing myself, I would always go with the darker one, the Espresso, only because I know the darker will always look more natural in the hair. But for today, I will use the dark brown, as I feel like it's really actually a good match for her. So using the dark brown, I'm going to start beading. I know that for one row, I probably need around like 15 beads. People always ask me that when I'm teaching in-person classes, and I found that usually 15 is about the right amount. Now I'm just going to take the end of my looper and then just scoop up those beads. As you can see, like what I was talking about earlier, the silicone is lined in the same shade as the bead. Traditionally, you would see those silicone lined beads with that really unsightly clear or kind of like whitish silicone, which is fine, but the minute you clamp down on that bead, you expose that silicone, so you see that white silicone peeping over the bead. That's why I love this, because even if the silicone is exposed, you don't see it because it's the same color as the bead. Okay, so that should be about enough. I can now go in and start putting these onto the head. Before we begin beading, let's talk about section size. How wide or how narrow do you have to take your section? For me, I always do about a thumb's width. So most of the time my section is always going to be from this end of my thumb to this end. So that would be the width of my foundation. You do have the rule also of dropping down for density. So if someone has finer hair, you might want to take a deeper section. I feel like I very rarely do this now though, only because I'm using a smaller bead. If you're taking way too much hair, chances are it's not going to easily fit into that smaller bead. So what I tend to do is I pivot my bead size. So if they've got thicker hair, I might need an actual bigger bead that has more girth, right? So while we're on that topic of dropping down for density, let me touch on that a little bit more and go into detail as to why I don't truly practice that. First of all, I don't like dropping down too much, because then the weft looks so low down from the part line. Also, if they have really fine hair, no matter how much you drop down, chances are it's still not going to be enough hair to support maybe 4 layers of those infinity wefts. So what I tend to do now, instead of trying to drop down and take more hair into the section, what we should be thinking of is keeping that section size consistent regardless of what head we work at, and instead changing how much weight that we add to it. For example, a lot of the time I will section pretty much the same for people with fine hair or thick hair, but what I will change is how many wefts I actually put on per row. But everyone is going gonna have a super similar looking foundation. It's just that if they have finer hair, I know that they can't accommodate 3, 4, maybe even 5 infinity wefts. I know that my max is probably 2. Rather than with someone with thicker hair, I know that I can load up safely all of those layers of infinity weft and it's still going to be supported because they have enough hair. So now let's move on to our beaded foundation. So now starting in the middle of the head, I'm going to drop down straight and all the way across. Flip that up and then to the side, making sure everything's nice and even. And you see this little hair here? It looks like it's dropping down at an angle. We want it to mimic this line here. I'm just going to flip that up and then I'm just going to get those little hairs out the way so that everything is nice and even. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to take my looper tool and I'm going to pinch this hair here, bring that through the top of my looper tool and then just slide that bead up. I always work high here. I never want to drop that bead down low, otherwise when I slide it up I might create some crosshairs. And then once I'm happy with it, I can wiggle around where that bead is sitting. We want nice movement, so I'll drop it down, clamp, 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 and then flip up to make sure everything is nice and fluid and I have nice up down movement. You never want to take your bead and clamp it all the way up like that. What you're going to see is it's going to pucker and pull in, and then when you flip up it's going to be really tight and uncomfortable for your client. So if that ever happens, always remember we are wanting to drop that bead down. Now I'm going to do my next bead directly next to that, again making sure everything's nice and even, no crosshairs, and then with my looper tool and sliding that bead up into place. Now I'll take my pliers and again just making sure it's dropping down. 1, 2, 3, that I have nice up down movement, and again directly next to that. And as I work up you can see my section now is starting to follow the curvature of this section here. So you always want your subsection to mimic whatever is going on with your initial section. I want everything as clean as possible, and then pinch, bring that through and then pop that bead up to where we want it. One other thing is we always want the bead to sit in the middle of our section. We want an even amount of hair either side. We never want it to sit too close to one side versus the other. It should always be directly in the middle of our section. Something you can do if you want is you could even carve out all of your subsection and then put a Velcro underneath. If you wanted to do that, you could carve out like I've done there, and then with your Velcro you can just put it underneath like that, and then all you have to do now is just slice, slice, slice all the way. So that is another way of doing it. I've seen people, they like to do it that way too, where they carve out that subsection. Again, it's all preference. So you never want to go like this, and let me show you why. Sometimes when you drop it down low and then you push that bead up, you're accidentally going to create all of these little teasing and crosshairs. So that's why when we're working with our beaded foundation, we always want to make sure that everything is high and tight, and then that way you just drop it down to where you want it when you need to. Any little crosshairs I'm just moving out the way, and like this guy I don't want in there, and then I'm just going to take my pliers, clamp. One thing that I'm always aware of is the client's scalp. Remember, on a real person that scalp is more flexible, so if you pull it really taut, you're pulling that scalp towards you. What's going to happen is once you've gone in and clamped down and you let go and release, that scalp is going to bounce back into place, and that bead that originally was sitting here will then sit a little bit higher because the scalp is more elastic and it stretches and pulls. When it bounces back, the bead will bounce back with it, so then it might be too tight. So one thing that I do to avoid that happening is I'll take my section just as I always do, bead that, and then I'll drop it down, and I have very, very little tension here. I'm not pulling it taut, I'm letting it go and let it live where it needs to. So then that way when I clamp down and I release my section, nothing is bouncing back up or higher than I want it to be. Okay, so I'm gonna remove this Velcro now, and now I'm pretty sure I probably only need one more bead, because I know that once I get to this point, this part of the ear, I'm pretty much done. I don't want to eat too far into that hairline. Usually it's like an inch away from the hairline that I'll stop. The only time I would break that rule is if they have thicker hair. So people with thicker hair, you can work closer into the hairline, especially because they might have more density, so they're able to cover that weft more. Rather than someone with finer hair, you're going to have to set it back that 1 inch. Otherwise, if they wear their hair forward, you're going to be more likely to see that weft. And also the hairs in front are more fragile, so always be aware of that, making sure everything's nice and clean. And then that is going to be my final bead on this side. I feel like infinity wefts, I can break the rules a little bit, ingenious, just because you can really control how much you're stacking and layering. So I don't always follow that 1 inch guideline, because I know that on some people I could easily do a bead there and it's not going to affect the install. Even if they wore it up, I know that you probably couldn't see it. And sometimes I'll ask people, you know, do you wear your hair up a lot? Do you wear it down? If, like for me, for example, I always wear my hair down, you can bring my beads further forward because my hair is medium density, so I definitely can support it. And also I don't wear my hair up. I would prefer to have coverage here and have my weft sit further back, but again, it's preference, so it's all questions that we should ask our client. Okay, so now that I've done with this side, I'm going to rotate my doll head round and I can begin doing all of my beads here. All right, again, following the same rules all the way around the hair, making sure that bead is sat in the middle. We don't want it going off at an angle. Whenever I'm prepping someone for an install, I always make sure that when they're coming in for that install appointment, if I'm not doing any color services, I always ask them to come in with clean, dry hair and preferably blown out smooth. I feel like with extensions, they're always going to be the easiest to install on straight hair. Immediately by the hair being like flat ironed, you're eliminating more of those cross hairs as well. And then it's also easier for you to get like really clean sections. So just the prep is really important. So I always get them to come with clean, dry hair. And then if I need to smooth it out with a flat iron, I'm always build that into the time it's going to take me to do the install. Sometimes I feel like with weft, it doesn't even have to be perfectly clean. If they have like a tiny bit of oil on their hair, it actually makes it a little bit easier as well. So that's why I think people sometimes like to do their foundation on wet hair, because again, it's easier to get rid of the crosshairs, same as if the hair is a little bit oily. I personally always just install on dry hair and then I'll just use a little bit of hairspray. The reason behind that is because I feel like when their hair is wet, it's definitely more delicate, but I know a lot of people that do it, love it, and they're a professional, so again, I trust that they know what they're doing. And then I always see them go in and dry everything before they install, which is key. You don't want that hair to stay wet, because that's when you run into that territory of mildew and mold and all those kind of things. We don't want to harbor any sort of bacteria. But yeah, I have been asked that before, so it's just thought it would be interesting to notate. I'm definitely someone who has the belief of you do what works for you. I'm never someone that's going to sit there and bash something. Just because I don't do it myself doesn't mean that it's wrong. We all have our different ways of working, and I think it's important that we respect that and respect other people within our space. Like I said at the start, extensions are not a one size fits all. So the way that we do the install, of course, will reflect that. Again, making sure everything's nice and clean. Coming towards the end now, so I'll do one more here. Again, just using that ear as a guide. So I've come towards the end of that ear, inch away from the hairline. So I'll just want one more bead there, and then we are good. The more you do your beaded foundations, the quicker you're going to get as well. I feel like I'm working a little bit slower because obviously I'm talking through the foundation, but on a real person, I can do this pretty quickly. All these little crosshairs, scoop out the way, and then I'm going to go in and just clamp that. Perfect. Now that we've done our beaded foundation, that's when I'm going to go in and flip up those beads. I am going to be showing you a hidden row today. It's my favorite way to install Genius or Infinity Weft. So the first thing that I do before I even begin to stack is flip all of those beads up and out of the way. So usually I'll flip up a few beads at a time. I'll do 1, 2, 3. Starting in the middle, I'm just going to take the end of my comb and just get all of those beads and slide up. Always making sure that I haven't like accidentally picked up any little hairs like here. I just want to make sure those are out the way. Everything is clean. And then I just take one of these little gold hair clips that I showed you earlier and then just pin those up. I'm going to just turn my mannequin round, and then again with your comb or with your nails, sometimes I even just use my nails. I'm just going to scoop up those beads, flip up. Again, any little crosshairs, we don't want them in. I'll just make sure that I'm really getting those out of the way. And then now with my little gold clip, pin that out the way. So 1, 2, and then now 3. I've got 3 different layers that I'm going to be doing on my mannequin head. Typically, for most people, I'll do about 3 Infinity Weft or Genius Weft layers. If they've got finer hair, I'll usually do 2. And then for kind of like medium to thick, I'll usually do about 3 or even 4. But I feel like my go-to is 3. And then again, my thinking is if I feel like anything's going to be too heavy, I would rather lighten the load and then maybe go in and do an extra row, for example. Again, pivoting the way I'm thinking. I don't want to overbear that row and do too many on there. I don't want it to be too heavy. So that's where my mentality goes. How much weight realistically can this foundation support? And on her, it's going to be about 3. So your Genius or your Infinity Wefts will come as one long piece. Depending on the brand, it's going to be usually anywhere between like 32 inches to 42. Bellamy are longer, but your standard Genius Weft is about 32 inches in width. So of course this is going to be longer than the foundation, but the beauty of it is we can cut it to whatever size we want. One thing that I do is fold the corners. I don't really do this too much. I prefer to have a little bit of overhang and then I can fold that back on itself. So my weft will peep over those corners, which is fine because again, we can cut it to whatever size we want. To make it more manageable, I'm actually going to cut it before I even pin anything down. I'm just going to measure this up against my foundation. I'll scoop this round and then again here, and then just bring my thumb to where I want it. So now I know I want to cut it here, and then that's going to be the perfect size piece for me. All right, so now I'm going to just cut this, and then that's a more manageable piece for me to work with and pin down. So now we can begin just pinning that down so that everything's nice and secure before we sew. I like to put a pin in the pocket, and then I just do one more here just to secure that. And then again, just bring that round. With my nail, I'll kind of like push that up to where I want it. And then again, just pin it down through that pocket of hair. I like to keep the weft high and tight to that foundation. I don't want it to drop too much because then when you come to sewing, it's actually going to be more difficult for you. You don't want to sew and then get towards the end and realize that you've missed that whole under layer. So it's always important that we keep that weft as close to that subsection as possible. If it drops down, you're going to have a hard time later because you're going to be looking for it as you sew. You guys, I get so much hate for the amount of clips that I use, but it's okay because I feel like there's method behind the madness. It works for me. Again, if it works for you, do it. If you don't like to use that many clips, good for you. You're probably saving time as well. But I just know that this is how I like to work because the amount of installs that I did to start where it was a hidden row and I didn't clip it enough, and you know, the wefts begin to slip and fall down, and then I get towards the end of my install and I flip everything up and I realize that I've got big chunks that don't have any stitching because I didn't catch it with my needle. So I promise you there is method behind this, and there's a reason why I like to do it. It's just from experience, you know. So just pinning everything down. One thing I will say is if you are transitioning from hand-tied wefts into an Infinity or a Genius, they are a lot slippier. They don't have any return hair here, so I do feel like they are more inclined to slide. Another reason why I like to clip them so much. When I'm working with hand tied, I never really had to do this many clips because they kind of stay up where you want them. Rather than with an Infinity or a Genius, they are definitely more inclined to kind of like slip down. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to go in and do another layer. Again, something I've changed, I've pivoted. I used to only do one under and then everything else on top, but then I found it would get so bulky. So in order to distribute the away evenly and have it feel flat, I like to load up 2 underneath and then I'll do 1 on top, or maybe 2 underneath and 2 on top. All right, so I've already gone ahead and cut this a little bit again, so it's more manageable to work with, and you can kind of see now where it lines up to. So it's coming about 1 bead in here, and then the same on this side as well. I'm not bringing it all the way forward. The reason I'm not bringing it all the way forward is because I only want a weft under and a weft on top of the bead in those anchor in areas. I don't want bulk the first bead. I want it to be as flat as possible, and the way that I do that is by controlling how far forward I bring the weft. So again, just pinning everything down and into play. I don't need as many grips here. I just want to kind of like pin it where I need it, shimmy that round. Sometimes I'll even just kind of like pick up the clips that I already have. And then here, I'm actually going to trim that a little bit because I know that I'm not going to be able to catch that with my stitch. So it's going to be a little flappy. So now, instead of trying to struggle and kill myself trying to sew that piece, I'm just going to trim it off ever so slightly. And now I'm just going to rotate her round and then just secure on this side. Again, thinking of making everything even. So I trimmed off this piece of weft about 2 pockets in on the other side. Again, keeping it even. I'll just make sure that I do the same here, and I'm just going to trim off that bit of weft that I don't want. Once I'm happy with how that looks, that's when I can then let down these beads and flip them down on top. So I'm just gonna take my clips out and I'll flip these beads down. If any of these clips are in the way, you just take them out, and then I'll just go in and clip it from underneath. Same here, these clips are in the way, so I'm gonna just take them out, and then you can put them back in if you want, or you have the option of just securing it like this. I like to do this so that it just keeps everything where I want it. I feel like this is the step that probably takes me the longest, honestly. Once you, you know, have this done, all you have to do now is just sew. But this definitely takes a little bit of time because you're really making sure that everything is clipped down and where you want it, and all of those layers are sitting how they should be. Now we can do 1 more on top. So this is going to be my final layer. As you can see, I've already pre-cut it a little bit. I just measured it and I might just trim a little bit more, but this now is going to come all the way forward to this bead here. Remember, I never want anything here. I don't want to overload these anchoring areas. So I only want 1 under, 1 on top in this area here. And then I'll start this one from 1 bead back. If they're really fine, you might even want to start it from even further. But on most people, I'll do 1 all the way, 1 to this bead here, to that finishing at the start of that second bead, and then 1 on here. So then it kind of goes 1 with nothing, 2 with 3, and 3 with 4, as we kind of go into stacking them and layering. So now line that up there, and I'm just going to go in, and I'm going to go in under this. I'm not going to go like that because I know that I need to keep that free for when I start my stitching. Instead of doing like that, if I go in like that, when I fold it over, this clip is going to block me. So I've just pivoted, and I'm actually going to put it like that. That way it's not getting in the way of that first bead. Again, making sure everything is nice and taut. These wefts definitely have a bit more give to them. For that reason, you want to make sure that you're really stretching them. You want to keep it taut. The reason is, if you don't keep it taut, that's when you're going to find that you will have rippling happen within your install as you go through and sew. So for that reason, I'm really keeping that weft taut and then pulling it round to where I want it to lay and to live. Remember, this is all something that you can pivot. So as you go through that install, if you feel like it's starting to ripple or it's not as taut, that's when you go in and you can just kind of switch up those clips and make sure it's really, really nice and taut. And then I'm going to do 1 more clip here. That is eating into that bead a little bit. So all I want to do is just trim that up to measure up to this pocket and then take that out of the way. So now we are ready to start sewing our weft down. So thread choice, very important. I already spoke about what thread I like, and that's the nylon thread. But now let's talk about color. The great thing is your beads are always going to match up to the color. So I use the dark brown bead with Lush, and they have the espresso thread or they have the dark brown thread. I always will line up whatever colour bead I use, my thread will tend to match that. So now I know I don't need espresso, I'm going to use that dark brown shade. So that is going to blend into the hair really, really nice and seamlessly. To double or not to double? That is the question. So do you like to double your thread or do you like to do single thread? Again, preference. One thing that I've been loving and I really wanted to demonstrate today was a single thread. Why I utilize a single thread, how to anchor the weft with a single thread, and all the other things in between. So for the single thread, you only need one wingspan. With a double thread, you need two, but with single, you only need one wingspan for that row. So I'm measuring out the one wingspan and then I'm just going to cut that thread. So let me go in now. I will cut that and then I'm going to take my needle and thread this through, and then all I have to do is just tie, and I just do this 2 times. One, and that is just securing my thread onto the needle. I feel like the single thread also looks really good on people with finer hair. The less weight I can add, the better. It just melts into the hair, and it's something that I've been doing pretty much for all of my Genius and Infinity Weft installs. And now we are ready to sew. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do now is adhere this single thread onto our foundation. We can't do a typical lock stitch because we don't have that double thread. Because we have a single, we have to pivot the way that we adhere it. So the way that I do it is through that first bead, I unclamp it and then I actually go up through the bead with my needle and pull that thread all the way till it reaches the end. So around here, I'm gonna have just a little bit hanging down, but that's good, that's what we want. And then I'll just go in one more time. Any crosshairs, get out the way. And then now I'm just gonna clamp that down and then just pull that thread up so it's nice and full and secure. Now that that's done, we can begin now to anchor the thread onto the foundation and onto the weft. So my first stitch, pushing this thread to the side, I'm going to drop my needle down through that first pocket of hair and under the weft. And you can see that that thread is on top of the needle, and then I'm going to take this string and I'm going to wrap it around the needle 1, 2 times, and that's going to create a little knot that when we pull through will really help to lock everything down. So this is our anchoring stitch, and you can see it's super small, that knot. It's not bulky, it's not going to get in the way, it just helps to lock everything down. Once I've done that first stitch, I'm going to push my thread out of the way, and then I will take this part of the weft and fold it back onto itself. So now I'm going to fold that, making sure that this is lining up with the pocket, and then with my pliers I'm just going to pinch that. Then I can take my clip and then just lock that little piece down. Same thing here, and then I'll just do one more here. So now that's all folded back on itself, and that's when I can begin to lock down this corner. So again, pushing that thread to the side, I use my thumb to feel for the bead and also to support the needle, because when it drops down, you want to be able to catch it with your thumb so it doesn't drop down too far. So now I'll push that through, and then I'm going to take this piece of thread and again 1, 2. Just for the anchoring stitches, I like to do this to make sure that that corner is super duper secure. Pull that up, and then now we can go into our blanket stitches. As I go, I remove my clips. If they're not serving me anymore, I'm going to move them out the way. Don't let those clips get in the way. Move them as you go. So now I'm going to do a blanket stitch. You can do this where you go straight into that pocket, but then I feel like you've got too much thread loose that might be more inclined to being snagged. So to make sure everything is really, really nice and flush and flat, I actually like to do one stitch, and it's just above the bead. So let me pull this down so you can see. So it's just above the bead. I'm not going through the bead, I'm only going through the weft, and that's just to make sure that that stitch isn't being stretched too much into that pocket. Let me just make that secure again. Okay, so one stitch only through the weft itself, just to make sure that those stitches are not being stretched and creating something here that's inclined to be snagged. And now with this next stitch, that's when I can go through the pocket of hair, through that second pocket, making sure that I'm catching both of the layers and then bringing that stitch up. So now what we're doing is blanket stitches, carrying that thread across and then dropping that needle down. Can you see here I've got that little piece of weft? So I'm going to lock that down when we get to this point. Just for now though, I'm just going to do one stitch through the wefts themselves, not through any pockets of hair. I like to do this in between the pockets of hair because it really helps to lock those layers of weft together. Remember, this is not like a volume or a flex weft. These wefts, because we've stacked them and layered them, we want to make sure that we are actually helping bring them and keep them together, all the little layers. Now I've come to here, so now I know I've got another weft here that I need to incorporate. So I'm going to drop my needle down, making sure now that I'm picking up 3 layers of weft, and then just pulling my needle through and pulling that stitch up to secure. As you can see, I'm starting to get a bit of ripple in here, so all I want to do is just pivot and make sure that that is nice and secure. These clips here, I don't need them anymore, so I'm just going to remove. Carrying my needle across, making sure I'm picking up 3 layers of weft, working as close to the spine as possible, and then pulling that up to secure. So now I'm going to do another stitch here. I've got 3 layers of weft still because my next weft isn't going to start until this pocket here. So again, 3 layers, pulling up to secure. So now always peel back, or from the top you can kind of look up and see. So now I can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 wefts. So with this stitch, dropping down and making sure I'm picking up all 4 layers of that weft, pulling up to secure. Always just shimmying everything across as I need. Here, dropping down. When I'm dropping down through the pockets, I'm always trying to get as close to the bead as possible. The reason that I want to get close to the bead is so that those stitches almost act like a barrier. That bead isn't going to pop out of that hidden row. Now, dropping it down, 4 layers of weft, pulling that up to secure. Moving my clips out the way as I go. If they don't serve me, I move them out the way. And now I'm coming into the end of this. So I always want to make sure that I catch this. Otherwise, if that isn't caught, it will flip and start to annoy the client. So always making sure that I'm catching that little end piece. Drop my needle down through the pocket of hair, and then bringing this up, and then that is just going to lock the end of that little piece into place. So now this layer has ended, so now we just have 2 underneath and 1 on top. So when I'm dropping my needle down, I know I'm going to pick up 1, 2 under, and then 1 on top, 3, and then I'm just going to pull that up to secure, carry my thread across with my thumb acting as support, and then just through the wefts themselves at this point, because we're in between pocket, doing a blanket stitch. Carrying my thread across, feeling for the bead, dropping it down, pulling up to secure. Dropping my needle down, making sure I'm catching all of those layers, and then just pulling this up to secure. What's going to happen is, if you drop that needle down and you don't support it with your thumb, can you see what's going to happen there? You're going to create a really big split in the weft. So if you then try to pull that up, you've created a split and a hole. And that's because you have dropped down much too far and you haven't used that thumb. The goal of those stitches is for them to sit as close to the spine as possible. When you're doing this, you're also going to compromise the install because you're not going to have that nice veil of hair. You will have these big chunks and splits in the install. So if that happens, all you need to do is just come back on yourself and just take that stitch out. So now we're back, making sure everything is nice and where I want it, dropping my needle down, keeping it as high to the weft spine as possible, and then just pulling up to secure. The reason that I am emphasizing pulling up to secure is because I see people where they will pull down. Can you see what happens there? This line here will then sit down as opposed to being on top of the weft. You always want this line of threads to be on top. Again, it just makes it look so much more invisible. Dropping my needle down, making sure I'm picking up all 3 layers of those weft, and then just pulling that up to secure. I always will hold the extensions and then pull up. Another thing that you can do is with your pointer finger and your thumb, you can just secure it like that if you don't want to pull down. When you pull down as well like that, very gentle. You don't want to yank the wefts and move them out of place. It's all very gentle movements. You don't need that much pressure. So now another blanket stitch. This time we're going through the wefts themselves. We don't need any pockets of hair. Moving our clips out of the way when we don't need them. Making sure I'm catching all the 3 layers up to secure. Feeling for where that bead is. Top tip, if you are left-handed, you're going to find it easier to start on the left side of the head. So you would start your stitches here and then work your way around to the right side. I'm right-handed, so I find it easier to start from the right and work my way around. I find that my blanket stitches flow more because immediately that thread already wants to go to where I need it. Down through that pocket of hair. If that thread gets caught on the clip, just move that clip out the way. It's getting caught because we don't need that clip there. It's in the way now. So if things are in your way, we just move them. Carrying my thread across, and now again just going through those 3 layers of weft because I'm in between pockets, pulling up to secure. Carrying my thread across, feeling for the bead, seeing where those 3 layers are, and then just dropping that needle down, pulling up. And that is going through, if you've never done a blanket stitch before, it's going through this loop here that we've created. Blanket stitches are honestly the fundamental stitch of any weft install. So you're going to find that these stitches, the blanket stitches, are something that we use within any type of weft install, regardless if it's an infinity or a genius or a hand-tied flex. Whatever weft you're doing, chances are that through the bulk and majority of the install, it's going to be a blanket stitch. I like my stitches to look as uniform as possible because then I know that everything is going to feel the same. I'm not going to have areas that will feel tighter or looser compared to the others. The more uniform my foundation is, the more uniform my layering is, my stitching is, my finishing stitches are, all the things, the more even and comfortable I know that install is going to feel. It's also very aesthetically pleasing as well. Let's not lie. Okay, we're coming towards the end. So what you've probably noticed is I haven't folded this piece over yet. The reason for that is I actually like to bring all of my stitches forward, and then that way I can do what I did in that first pocket where I anchor this down first with that little double knot and then I fold across. Again, it's just a way that I feel like I can really get those corners super duper snatched. What you'll notice is if you fold it over before you have got to the end, so let's say I come here and I fold it, that weft tends to stretch out a little bit as you sew it down and it shimmies and moves across. So then sometimes what will happen is you sew everything down, but then this now is sitting way too far out because it shimmied as you were stitching. So that's why I like to lock everything down first and then I'll fold right at the end. So now I'm going to do another blanket stitch here, catching 1, 2, 3 weft, and then just pull that up to secure. So now can you see I'm coming towards the end of this second layer that's underneath. So what I want to make sure with my stitch now in between these 3 is that I'm catching that end. So I'm just going to pivot my clips a little bit, pull up to secure, and then I'm going to make sure that with this stitch here I am catching that end piece, pulling up to secure. So now we're coming towards the end. Again, blanket stitch. Now I've only got 2 pieces that I need to catch, one on top, one under, and then this last little bit here. And then I'm going to jump to this pocket because when I come back on myself, I'll do a stitch going through the wefts themselves. So I'm going to jump that and then just go straight to that pocket of hair. Pull up to secure, and now I'm going to do my finishing stitch here so that I can really lock that down. The way I start is the way I end. This is something again I learned. Your weft install should always be a mirror image. Whatever you do on one side, you should do on the other. Mirror image, it's how it's going to feel the most comfortable. Carrying this across, dropping my needle down through that pocket, you can see how close to the bead I get. not going through it, but super close to it. And then I'm going to go 1, 2 with that thread, creating that double knot. Same thing I did to start, making sure I don't have any crosshairs, pulling up to secure. Now I'm going to fold this back on itself. So I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to fold it back. And then with my pliers, I'm just going to clamp that down. With a clip, I'm just going to secure that piece and this little corner piece here. Now again, I'm going to do one more stitch, so that will really lock down that corner, down through the pocket of hair, under. Now I'm catching 2 layers, and then I'm going to go 1, 2, and then just pull that through and up to secure. Now I'm going to go back on myself and I'm going to do one little stitch just through the weft itself. Remember, I did this at the start, so mirror image, and then now I can go through that second pocket of hair, making sure that I'm picking up 1, 2 weft, flip that over because I'm still doing those blanket stitches, it's just reverse. And now I'm going to go through just the 2 layers of weft, not pocket, and then here I'm just going to go through those 2 layers. I don't need to drop my needle down through any pockets of hair anymore, because all I want to do here is just make sure that I'm just securing this little piece onto the wefts themselves. I don't want to do another stitch in the pocket. The only time I do a stitch in the pocket is this pocket and this pocket, and then the rest it's just going to be stitching through the weft. The reason that I do that is because I don't want anything to feel too tight. If I'm going to do more stitches in this area, it's going to feel tighter, and it's not necessary. So now I'm going to do a stitch through just the wefts themselves, and then I'm going to start to finish off. So I'm going to wrap 1, 2, 3 times now, and then just pull that through, lock that into place. Remove the clip because I don't need it, and then I'm going to do that one more time, dropping my needle down through the wefts themselves, not any pockets of hair, and then you can see I'm pulling this thread across to sit on top of the needle, just like a blanket stitch. 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to just pull that up to secure. Now at this point, I'm going to just drop my needle behind and then just shimmy that knot behind it, and then you can go off and trim. If you want, for extra security, you can even then go and unclamp this bead and take your thread through there. So let me show you how to do that if you feel like you want extra security. So I'll just push that to the side. I'm going to just find out where that bead is right there. I'll just clip that piece out the way, and then I'll go in and unclamp my bead. Then I'm going to take my thread and I'm just going to drop that down through the needle one more time. This is great. It gives extra security. I don't always do it, but I feel like if someone is a little bit rough on their hair, it's a great way to make sure that that anchor stitch is really locked down. And then now all I have to do is just trim off the excess thread and then just flip that down. Okay, so that pretty much completes our install. But I just wanted to show you one final thing that I always do, and that's just to cross-check my work. The way that I do that is I will actually go ahead and flip up the weft just to make sure that first everything is accounted for, all the different layers, and then I'm just going to try take out any little hairs that don't need to be in there. So sometimes what will happen is when you drop down your needle, you might accidentally pick up some of these hairs from underneath and they get caught in your stitches. So that happens, I just flip up the hair, and with the end of my comb I just slide them out. So I'll do the same here, making sure everything is where it should be. There's no crosshairs. Can you see there's a little crosshair there? I'm just going to gently slide it out. That way it's super comfortable. And I always do this regardless of how long I've been doing them for. Always do it. Attention to detail is honestly everything. And then let me show you the famous flip up. Look how nice. So clean, so comfortable. You can't see any beads at all. And if I was wanting to be extra attention to detail, seamlessness, and this was a real client, I would actually probably root these with a color that matches her base to make it even more seamless. Okay, we are almost at the end of our little mini course. However, one thing that I think is really important to touch on is pricing. So all of the pricing that I'm going to explain is in US dollars. However, if you did want pricing in pounds or euros, let me know, and it's something that I can definitely help you out with. So in US dollars, I have a few different ways that I charge for a Genius or an Infinity Weft install. If I am using Bellamy Infinity Weft, I charge the cost of the hair plus $300 per pack that I'm installing. On average, I'm installing around 2 packs of Infinity Weft. So the install price is $600 plus the cost of the hair. Let's say the hair costs $1,000, then it will be $1,600 total. If I'm using something like INH Professional or Covey or even Lush Hair, their hair actually comes in smaller pack sizes. So usually they're about 50-gram packs on average. Because of that, I don't charge in pack size, I actually charge per row. So if I'm charging per row, I charge $200 per row. Let's say I'm doing 2 rows, it's going to be $400 plus the cost of the hair. I hope that makes sense. Thank you so much for watching and attending this course. I feel like this is the perfect way to really get your foot in the door with hidden rows and starting to feel comfortable with doing them. Whether you're using a Genius or an Infinity or even a hand-tied weft, this is the perfect way to execute those hidden rows effectively. I am going to be launching a lot more education where we take a real deep dive into it, so please keep your eyes peeled for that. It's been an absolute pleasure. I want to help you as much as possible, and I feel like this is just the start of something amazing. Good luck on your installs. Send me pictures, tag me. I want to see your work and I want to see you grow, because honestly, if you win, I win.